Did you know that the United States of America has spent over $10 trillion in wars alone? Let's get the details from here. My name is Ishmael Mubarak and this is MI4 Studios. In this discussion, I am asking a simple question. Is the US ever going to be existing without being at war? Is that a possibility? 250 years of history. The United States of America can only boast of 17 years of peace. What is the breakdown of the 233 years of war? Years of peacekeeping, years of interventions, and years of authoritarianism on certain territories. Did you know how much that was costing the United States of America? Let's dive into history. You know, in 1775 up until 1783, that was when we had the American Revolutionary War. And this war was the birth of the United States of America through the war with the Great Britain as a then. So prior to 1775, the British were very supreme, or were the world supreme, because they had they had captured the entire of Europe. If you take a look at the history of Wales, the Poland or the Polish and all of those European histories, you realize that the British or the Britain was there and were very powerful. And also, even if you take a look at the Mongolians and the histories behind these Mongolian persons and their historical antecedent and the great America and the America, you realize that America came from somewhere before it has gotten to where it is today. 250 years. In 1798 and 1800 was the naval skirmishes, no formal declaration war that went through, because there was a war called the Quasi War with France. And that particular war in 1789 up until 1800 was a war that didn't have a specific declaration why that particular war was ongoing. But history and historians and analysts have also posited that after America was battered out of the 1775 to 1783 war, it wanted to have some level of supremacy and usurp that supremacy over Europeans. As at then, the French were also a huge contender in terms of that particular kind of contest, in terms of the superpower position of the world, and hence the America required or needed something that could curtail or stop or depress or suppress the French supremacy moving on. Hence that particular war, the War of 1812, that lasted for 3 years, is against the British over the trade and territory. Again, British supremacy before 1775, after the breakup of America, or the birthing of the United States of America, moving up onto the fight against the French. Moving from there, America, still with the vision of becoming the greatest economy of the world, wanted to control how the world trade was conducted and territorial gains. And so therefore, as at that time, Britain, as I have said, historically was the greatest nation or the greatest people, and they had to go at war with them for 2-3 solid years to be able to conquer and see themselves on top of the world or the global trade territorialism. The Mexican-American War started in 1846 and ended 2 years afterwards, which was the US gains Western territories from the Mexicans. So you could juxtapose that to how the United States of America has usurped so much power over the Mexicans, and the way and manner they share such borders together over there. The Civil War started in 1861. So in the ages, or in the years of 1775 up until the 1861s thereabout, America had never rested and had gone to wars almost every single decade during that particular time up until the day 2025. Here is it. The Civil War started in 1861 and ended 4 years after that particular war, and it was just an internal war over slavery and unionship, because as at the time that 1700s, the Portuguese, the English, and whoever had come to the shores of the African continent had entered deeply into slave trade with the African leaders and, whoever the monarchs that were in charge of the Africa as at that time. And the slavery business had gone really high up until the middle of 1700s and has started to see some level of opposition in the middle of the 1800s, and hence the many slaves as well as the many unions and many countries that frown on the slavery activities, and also internally some persons politically who frowned on the slavery activities, also created this particular internal rival or internal war that lasted for about 4 solid years in the United States of America. In 1898, US gained Philippines and Guam as well as Puerto Rico through the war, and this was one of the greatest wars we could talk about since the 18th to the 19th century and that regard. In the 20th century, there's been a lot of engagement. US has been busy on the war front as the World War I started in 1917 and it ended 1 year. The US joined allies later in the war and took a significant turn in the World War II, where in 1941 to 1945, the global war started and the US emerged as superpowers from that particular convention, and that led to the Bretton Woods convention that stated that, or that required the entire world to trade in the US currency or have their forex reserve or foreign reserve in the US currency, therefore giving the United States of America the position of the world superpower. So this culminated, or this started from the 1941 to 1945 World War II that started. So the Korean War happened just some few years after the 1945 World War II, which lasted for some 3 years in 1950 up until 1953, where the first Cold War, proxy war had happened to this regard, losing so many people and so many men to that regard. Vietnam War started in 1962 and ended in 1975, and this is the longest Cold War or conflict that has been ever recorded in the history of wars. The Gulf War started in 1990 and a year later it ended from there. The Iraq expelled themselves from Kuwait, and that particular breakup came, and that resulted into what we see today, the Iraq USA war, and I'll be bringing you more details to this regard. I need you to see the sequence as to the things that has happened and how much the United States of America has spent its lifetime and trillions of dollars fighting wars and millions of people dying out of it and nations being suppressed and repressed and depressed out of this particular stuff. In the 21st century, we have seen the 2001 to 2021, war that is surged on a particular country, and this is the longest US war in counterterrorism focus, because George W. Bush, the then US president, in 2001, when he declared war over Iraq, it was to curb and to counter, terrorism attack that was being recorded so much and was rampant to this regard. And the United States of America spent approximately 20 solid years in continuous killing and in continuous attempt to counter terrorism. Has terrorism been overcome? The big answer is no. Has it been curtailed? The big answer is no. So has the fight or has the killing in Iraq for 2 solid decades been justified? I mean, that's a question for the gods out there. And so the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, is what I spoke about. The Iraq war also, started from 2003 and ended in 2011. And that was because the America wanted a regime change in Iraq, where the regime change and insurgency needed to be curbed, and so therefore the leadership of Iraq had to be taken out of power with the support of the United States of America. Syria war, Syria civil war is still up to date happening. And it started in 2014, 11 solid years of continuous killing. And this is a NATO-led airstrike that is happening over there in this particular regard. I mean, 2014, this is anti-ISIS operation, and it is a limited engagement starting from there. So are we going to see United States of America stop fighting? No, let's not forget the Libya intervention. That is how they call it, or that was how it has been christened. It happened in 2011, and Libya has not been the same or have been able to recapture its particular form. When we talk about Yemen, Somalia, Gaza, Lebanon, it is actually ongoing, and drone strikes is and special operational activities or special ops and support roles are being played by the United States of America to this very regard. So take a look at the long list of wars that I can mention, and there are some coveted and peacekeeping missions that I could also talk about. I could talk about the CIA backed coups in Iran in 1953. I can talk about that of Chile in 1973. I can talk about Congo in the 1960s. I can talk about the peacekeeping in Haiti in 1994. I can talk about Bosnia in 1995. I can talk about Kosovo in 1999. I mean, name it. If you have to christen some military actions as humanitarian, you could call the 1992 Somalian activity as a humanitarian one, and that of 1999 Timor one as a humanitarian one. So these are a list of so many activities of military incursions, military, activities that the United States is has found itself into and financing. And not only this, the United States of America has had the military presence in almost everywhere in the world, and that has also cost them trillions of dollars to this particular regard. This long list of activities of military, backdrop led me to ask that one simple question. Could America exist without ever being at the war front? Could you discuss that? Did you watch to this point? If you watched to this point, drop a comment. Are we educating ourselves? Are we getting informed? Let's get interactive in the comment section. Are you an American? Are you a veteran? Are you a senior citizen of the United States of America? Are you in any part of the world watching this particular video? Have you asked yourself this question? If you have, drop a comment. Do you see that there is ever going to be an America without involving themselves into war and spending trillions of dollars, which would have kept a better America going? Almost every president in the history of the United States of America has been involved in one military operation or another. Almost every leadership from the American perspective has seen some level of, threat from somewhere, and so therefore there has to be bombings and other stuff. Could the America ever exist without fighting wars? How do you feel as an American when you find your nation IGPing the entire world, military-wise, security-wise, when every single war is a U.S. war? When every single insurgence is a U.S. involved insurgence, when you find thousands of, these issues, and you find your nation supporting one way or another, I cannot justify the stance why the U.S. would either be on the offensive or on the defensive or be in supportive to any of these initiatives. But then, as a taxpayer, as a civilian, as a regular American, as a peace-loving American, as a human being born or coming from America, how do you feel when you find your country be involved in litany of wars and insurgents and incursions and counterterrorism and terrorism and everything that derails and eats up into your budget so much and so well? Can't other nations have their affairs? What is the rule that some nations, yes, I know some nations are messing up, fighting and killing themselves, and some persons or unscrupulous persons have come together to create certain groups like the jihadist group and whatever. If you go into some of the news report and other stuff, you realize that some of these unfortunate groups have seen sponsorship coming from the United States of America. It's sad to say. To me, It's not like it's a nice thing for me to talk about, to be able to just point accusing fingers at America. No, it is the greatest country in and on earth. It has reigned as the superpower after the World War II, as I've just mentioned, and that has given it that particular or peculiar role and position in the lives of everybody in the world. And that's a big thing to do. That's a beautiful thing to do. I love America. I love Americans. I've got American friends. Yes, I have not visited yet, but I know I'm going to do that definitely in the future. And, you know, I don't know. I just don't know. How do you feel? From the revolution to counterterrorism, America's military engagement span over 180 conflicts. This timeline unpacks key wars, covert operations, shifting of doctrines, from the naval skirmishes of 1798 to the high-tech wars of the 21st century. What is America looking for? Is it the world peace? Is it how to achieve the world peace? What is anybody looking for? Stretching resources and lives on wars. If there are a lots of, statistics that clearly tells you that there's so much money that has gone into wars, and some of these monies that have gone into wars, you cannot even, calculate or estimate it. I'm talking about $2.75 billion into the 1775-1783 war. You can justify it. They needed independence. I'm talking about 1812 war of about $1.78 billion. 1846 up to 1848, we are talking about $2.72 billion. In 1861 to 1865, we are talking about $91 billion. $10.33 billion in 1898, 1917 up until 1980, so $466.91 billion going into the war. 1941 to 45, $5.7 trillion going into the war. 1950, 1953 saw $476.69 billion entering into the war. 1962, 73 saw $1.03 trillion, and 2001 to 2021, US has, spent over $3.68 trillion and counting into wars. This mountain of money. What has been the purpose of the war? Let's say up until 1945, where the Second World War ended. Let's assume it was to become the superpower of the world. You achieve that. You have that. You don't need soldiers. You don't need drones. You don't need anything to maintain that strategy. You need a strong economy, a booming market, a booming infrastructure, social, production, industries. That is what you need to keep up with your superpower rate or superpower standards of the world. More money, more activities, making sure that every single thing that we use in any part of the world is American made. And with that, you would keep your superpower, standards. Just as, some 3 decades ago, China was a nobody. And now as we speak, China is a superpower in terms of military. It's a superpower in terms of economic prowess, just because it has stuck to industrialization. It has stuck to production. It has stuck to, technology. And it has stuck to infrastructural development of physical city, expansions of their city, moving into technology and encroaching in areas of science and research that nobody has ever, dreamt that a country such as the People's Republic of China was going to go do, even under the kind of leadership that they have. It's semi-democracy, semi-military, and it is more authoritarianism. And we cannot take away the fact that when one person is leading with so much power, it sometimes could go bad, as it has been an exemplary of long leadership of African leaders. But China has done what nobody expected it to do within a matter of 3 decades, and China is actually moving ahead of itself to be living in 2050 as of right now, given some of the technological advancement breakthroughs that they have been able to annul, and has become the industrial hub of the entire world, including the world superpower, the United States of America. It didn't just take military powers for America to become the superpower of the world. It took a strategic economic decision in the Bretton Woods documentation that saw the currency as a stable currency, stabilized enough that people could come and invest their money or put their resources into America's economy, and they'll feel comfortable that when they need it back, they're going to get it. And so therefore, it doesn't actually mean that there's supposed to be so much military presence or military power or military incursions or whatever it is. I do not dispute the fact that some of these wars and some of these insurgents and incursions are very, very, very justifiable, because some of these, peacekeeping deals and other stuff. But majority also have a lot of questions that, you could ask about that. America is doing great. America is doing awesome. It's doing awesome by providing aid for the world. That is the superpower we want. America is awesome. It's doing great by welcoming, visitors, aliens. That is the kind of America we want. That's the kind of superpower we want, because nobody wants to flee away from a superpower. Everybody wants to come closer to a superpower, right? Because, everybody wants to go to some kind of heaven. The Christian wants to go to the Christian heaven. The Muslim wants to go to the Muslim kind of heaven. Thank you. The Muslim want to go to some Muslim heaven. And the traditionalist has gotten some, where he believes the witcheries or whatever. They all have their belief as to something good, something great is coming from somewhere. So if there is a God, as it has been stipulated, then people want to go to that particular God, and so therefore they try to do the good things to go to that particular war. So if you become a superpower and you're being a superpower by virtue of great things, by virtue of good things, by virtue of humanitarian standards, where everybody will see you as a go-to place for money, for resource, for this, for that, and you are seen as that, people will beg their way. People will worship their way into it. They are not going to come into it with guns and bombs and whatever it is. Does it take wars, military, so much of this money, and trillions of lives, so much of atrocities, so much of chemicals to become the IGP of the world? Could America rest? Could the taxpayers' money rest in America? Can the superpower sit on his throne and let the small, the young, the people crawl to its feet to worship him? When is America ever going to be without a war? For 17 years out of 250 years? Let's come again. My name is Ishmael Mubarak, and this is MI4 Studios. Thank you for watching.